All right, good evening. Welcome to our Wake County Board of Education meeting. It is August the 20th. It is exactly 5:53 p.m. We're sorry for running a little bit behind, but I had a very lively and interesting discussion during our work session, so we apologize for running a little bit behind, but thank you for your patience and thank you for joining us this evening. We'll call this meeting to order. Again, it is 5:53. We have a quorum with all board members here present in the boardroom along with Superintendent Moore. So we do have a quorum. If you would stand with me now and recite the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge of Allegiance. All right, thank you for that. We'll get right into our agenda, tonight's proceedings. We'll start with our information and superintendent's comments. So Superintendent Moore, I'll turn it over to you.
Good evening, Chair Sutton and board members. Congratulations to the students and faculty and administrators of Hilburn Academy and Weatherstone Elementary for once again being designated as model STEM schools of distinction. The schools had their designations renewed for 3 years after reviews by the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction. The STEM Schools of Distinction program was developed to identify and recognize exemplary schools that interweave science, technology, engineering, and mathematics into complementary coursework. To receive this honor, schools must demonstrate a culture of creativity and inquiry among students, teachers, administrators, and community members, with an emphasis on engaging students in innovation and problem solving. Additionally, schools must have an established network of community relationships and strategies that foster purposeful connections between academic studies and the world outside the classroom. These criteria are very much in keeping with our first strategic plan core belief, which states that every student is uniquely capable and deserves to be challenged, engaged in relevant, rigorous, and meaningful learning each day. By earning this distinction, faculty and staff members at Hilburn Academy and Weatherstone Elementary have demonstrated their commitment to this core belief. Again, congratulations. Congratulations are also in order for the staff of The Torch, the Athens Drive Magnet High School yearbook, for winning a Pacemaker Award from the National Scholastic Press Association. The Pacemaker is the association's premier award and recognizes the best high school publications in the nation. The Torch was one of a small number to receive the Pacemaker out of hundreds of entries. Special congratulations to editors Jacob McCarthy-Adams and Sarah Thomas and faculty advisor Elizabeth Luna. Finally, this evening, I would like to recognize Carolyn Colquitt, a music teacher at Carnegie Magnet Middle School who performed an original composition for piano and cello on Sunday at the North Carolina Museum of Art. She was commissioned to write the piece called The Netherlands, the Shoney Bear, The Journey, as a part of her role as an artist in residence at the museum. The composition is based on the exhibit, The Golden Years of the Netherlands. I was asked to give this exhibit a voice, Ms. Colquitt says. Originally from Indiana, Ms. Colquitt has taught music, strings, piano, and chorus in Wake County Schools since 1999. Serving at Hunter Elementary and Dillard Drive Middle before moving to Carnegie. Prior to being appointed as an artist in residence, Ms. Colquitt played piano in the museum's African Art Gallery. You can find a link to her performance on the WCPSS Facebook page. Thank you, and that concludes my comments.
Thank you, Superintendent Moore, for those comments. I don't have much to add tonight, but I do just want to say one thing, and that is, there are a lot of elected bodies, governing bodies that sometimes have a say and are vested or interest in public education. Obviously, our local school boards, but also those that support boards in terms of our county commissions, and particularly the General Assembly and even the Department of Public Instruction. And we all have one thing in mind, and that is to support public education and see the education, quality education of all of our students. And oftentimes, you may listen to our conversations and those of others, and it may seem that we are at odds. But I think we all do have a common goal and a shared goal, and that is the quality education of all of our students in North Carolina. And so I'll say that to say that we are partners. We are collaborators in this effort. And during this time in the legislative season, we call on our partners in the General Assembly to work with us, to help us, to listen and support some of the needs that we have, particularly around the kind of flexibility, the calls for funding and other things that are so important to us as the Wake County School District and others across the state. So those that are listening and with us tonight, we encourage you, the community, the public, other local elected officials, state officials, to let's all work together to see how we can better improve, better strengthen our public schools and make sure that they are working for all families, for all students, and for all communities. So I want to thank those that are here in support, many of our partners that also advocate on our behalf that are here, the Chamber and others. So I mean, I don't want to even start calling names, but thank you for that continued support, and we ask that you continue to support and advocate for those things that are important to us. We are working on our legislative priorities. I have board members with me tonight, a copy of a final draft, if you will, of our agenda. I'll share that with you all so that we can make any more changes that we need. It was not on the agenda tonight, but as you've heard, a number of the issues that are coming before us that are so important and where we need to reach out to members of our local delegation and others, that we want to move this piece forward as well. So I will share that with you this evening. Please take some time to look at that so that we can make some decisions to finalize that and get that both printed and up on our website, and again, so that we all can effectively advocate for many of the changes that we need. So with that, I'll stop and turn it over to Vice Chairman Happy for any questions, and comments, and we'll move right on through.
Thank you, Chair Sutton. It is National Volunteer Appreciation Week, and I want to take the time to thank all of our volunteers who are able to help out, whether it was with technology distribution, bringing your grocery bags to the school so that they could give something out to our students that were remote or in virtual academy, and especially to our PTA members. This weekend, you may have noticed on the Wake PTA website, they shared the winners and finalists in the Reflections competition. If you have a moment, please go over and look and see some of the amazing work and writing and art that our students were able to produce, and to be able to share those gifts during this time. And as we continue to open up, hopefully more of our volunteers that have been on pause will be able to return, because we so appreciate you. This past Thursday, we were able to go to the open house of the Indian Education Program and hear about the tutoring programs and other opportunities to connect with culture for our Native American students. Many thanks to the tribal leaders that were in attendance to hear what we're doing in Wake County for our students and to provide that connection. As always, a big thank you to Ms. Gwen Locklear and her team, and to the parents of the council, Ms. Melissa Lee, Karen Key, and Dr. Ryan Emanuel. Ms. Lee is going to be ending her time. Her daughter is graduating. And at the same time, we were honored with some performances by our Native students, specifically Lawrence of Cary High School and Heather of Holly Springs High School. And it's always encouraging to hear the gifts that our students have and their connection with their culture. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chairman Happy. Mr. Hegarty, since we're here at the table, I'll come to you if you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So first of all, I want to send special birthday greetings today out there to our former colleague, Mr. Bill Fletcher. I hope Becky and Bill are doing something a lot more fun than sitting around watching a school board meeting tonight. I also wanted to congratulate Hilburn Academy and Weatherstone Elementary, and just, again, call out all the good work that we're doing at our STEM schools of distinction. If you don't know about these programs, you really should look into them. They're doing exciting work in a lot of our schools for a lot of our kids. Finally, I do have something that I need to talk about, because as public officials, as we go out into the public, it is our job to come back and reflect the concerns of the public and public sentiment. And particularly in my area of the county right now, and I don't know about the rest of you, I'm hearing a lot of frustration. And it's understandable frustration, but it's frustration that we need to hear, to listen to, and work through around our quarantine policies and procedures, around student access to remote learning while in quarantine. These are difficult, and when there's a large number of students that have to shift into quarantine at one time, it's a strain on the school, it's a strain on the teachers. They're either losing students or gaining students and trying to bring them into it. And so, this is just a call for everyone to work together to help identify these problems where we can, see where we can make improvement, to understand that this is difficult work and there are bumps in the road that we have to work through. But if you have concerns, if you're having trouble, please bring them to us, please bring them to the staff. We've been working with our principals, area superintendents, and others, and they've been working really hard to try to resolve as many of these problems as possible when they arise. That's not to say that we don't hear you and we don't hear that frustration, but we're working on it, and we'll keep working on it until we can get through this together. So, again, thank you to everyone for your hard work, and we'll move forward together. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Haggerty. Ms. Carter.
Thank you, Chairman Sutton. I wanted to extend my congratulations as well to Weatherstone Elementary, and then I'll try to keep it as brief as possible. Did want to hit on just this past Saturday, I had the honor to attend Green Hope Elementary's beautification or spring cleanup day. The PTA did a fabulous job of organizing. There were students, families, and even some Green Hope High students there, cleaning up trash, pulling weeds, and I may or may not have gotten involved with trimming some bushes. Going all in. It was actually fun. I enjoyed working outside and just being able to see the transformation of the campus from the beginning of the day to the end. And just want to, again, just say thank you for the PTA and all of the great volunteers there. And any of my schools, if you're listening, if you have any beautification days coming up, please let me know. I really would love to help you out. And again, just thank you to all the staff and all the work you're doing, and especially as the VA enrollment period begins to open and what that's going to add to your load of normal responsibilities. So I appreciate all of that. And just a reminder for folks in District 9, I'll be having another D9 Connection meeting this coming up Monday at 7:30 p.m. And you can check my blog for more information. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Carter. Mrs. Kushner.
Thank you, Chair Sutton. Good evening to colleagues. And I wanted to start by saying thanks to all the District 6 principals and leaders who hosted me in visiting a lot of the schools. I'm trying to catch up and compete with Ms. Cash in her school visits, but it's been amazing, as I said in the work session, to see the protocols that are being placed, the hard work from teachers and staff to get furniture in the right places, get students in the right places, and it was great to see the adherence to our protocols, and our students are taking that work seriously as well as their schoolwork seriously. Volunteers are coming out from the NAACP and Activate Good, as well as the health department, and I'm sure Ms. Johnson-Hassel will highlight this as well for a vaccine clinic in Garner. There's an all-out work to get folks vaccinated. So on April 23rd as well as April 29th, there are 2 sites in Garner. If you need, if you're in that area and you need your first dose of vaccine, please do go online and find your shot so that we can move about the county safely. I think it's a light at the end of the tunnel through these. And this is the 50th anniversary of the Swan versus Charlotte-Mecklenburg decision that supported unanimously from the Supreme Court level school integration. And I think it's important for us to look back that that there was a lot of progress in the 50 years, as Dr. Martin also referenced. We're at a critical time going forward in our community and in our country to support school integration, which benefits all children, black children, brown children, white children, Asian children, all kids benefit from being in integrated schools. And I am proud to be on the board of a district that places that in high priority to have school integration. And in lifting up student voice, I wanted to thank the Office of Equity Affairs for sending the board members this fabulous 2020 Summer Writing Institute booklet. And since it's Poetry Week, I wanted to read it's short, I promise, from Queen Merck, a senior at Athens Drive High School. And this really just was, to me, a fabulous poem. I am fixed when I'm broken. Lucky for you, I'm cracked, so I'm open. And I'll end with that. Thank you, sir. Make sure that the Office of Equity Affairs knows that they need to send this to every single school board member, because, especially by the end of April, because it's been, it was a great way to celebrate National Poetry Week in my house. So I want to encourage everyone. I'm going to go scour it. I'm going to go get some before I leave tonight so that you guys can get that. And I'll pass it around.
Thank you for that, Ms. Kushner. Dr. Martin.
Thank you. And as always, I'd like to begin by thanking all the staff, as well as, excuse me, teachers, families, and the community. We're still working in very challenged situations. Like Ms. Mahaffey noted, I want to thank the Indian Education Council for their hosting us and, inviting us to their discussion. It wasn't necessarily hosting us, but a particular thank you personally to Melissa Lee, who has been president of the Parents Council for quite a few years. I very much appreciate her reaching out to me 3 years ago, which and then we brought the Indian Education Council here to the board meeting, and I think that has that started moving us in a direction to pay attention to something we should have paid attention to a long time. I love the message from many of the students that we need to change the vocabulary from Native Americans were to recognize that Native Americans are. And I think that voice from our students is very critical. But thank you, Melissa Lee, as you move on. Your leadership was very important, and thank you. On Thursday, National Board Certified teachers are going to be recognized, those both getting it for the first time and renewing it. So we're looking forward to that celebration. Tomorrow at 2 p.m., the District 5 BAC will be meeting. Mr. Drew Cook and Dr. Paul Coe will be meeting with us. And finally, as I have been doing for the last, since the pandemic began, I think it's important for us to understand the status of where we're at with respect to the COVID pandemic. Based on the numbers reported on the Wake County Public Health website, the latest 7-day rolling average has Wake County at 126 cases per 100,000 population. If you look at the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services data, the data reported for the last 2 weeks, unfortunately showed that the school-aged children, the 5 to 17-year-olds, have gone up. And for the second time since the pandemic began, here in Wake County, the 5 to 17-year-old rate is above the county average. So the 5 to 17-year-olds are being infected at a higher rate than the county average. There is good news. The staff cases reported to our Wake County Public Schools dashboard are, for the last 2 weeks, are the lowest and third lowest that they've been since the beginning of the pandemic. I think that is clear evidence that the vaccines work. So thank you to all staff who have been vaccinated. For those who haven't, I very strongly encourage you to do that. When you look at the number of cases over time, it is absolutely clear that the vaccines work. Keep it up. Unfortunately, I can't say the same thing for the student population, but students are not yet eligible to, or all students are not yet eligible to be vaccinated. Anyone 16 years and older is eligible, and I strongly encourage you to get vaccinated. Unfortunately, in the last week, the 77 cases among our students is the highest number of students that we've had since the pandemic began. Of those, one school had 9 cases just in last week. 2 schools had 5 cases. 1 school had 4 cases. So these are things that we need to be paying attention to. Get vaccinated if you can, particularly all you high school students. Pay attention to as much distance as you can, masking. Be careful, because we cannot afford to have us continuing going in this direction. We have to work together as a community to get this under control. So I wish I had the better news from the student front. We don't. We get the good news on the staff front challenge, but we've got to meet that challenge for the safety of all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Martin. Mrs. Scott.
Thank you, and good evening. I wanted to start out by letting folks know that District 1 does have our final Board Advisory Council meeting virtually this Thursday, 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. You can find out more information if you go to the main Wake County website, go to School Board About Us. You can see it on that calendar. I believe it's also on the main page of the webpage where you can find the registration information. And the topic will be budget, and we're hearing public hearing on that this evening, so I know parents will definitely want to be able to take advantage of that conversation and also to get that information. Like my other colleagues, I'm so thankful to our area superintendents for taking us on tours of schools so that we can see what it looks like inside of these buildings, and thankful to have the flexibility to do that, as I am not also full-time employed elsewhere. So I do appreciate the opportunity. Seeing some great things happen in our Wake Forest schools that are all on traditional calendars, and then was able to visit all Rollsville schools with Dr. Savage, who actually happens to be in here this evening. And I say this all the time, I just cannot tell you how amazing our educators are and how resilient our children are. And while school looks very different, it always brings me, of course, great joy to hear the sounds of band taking place. And I do thank our fine arts teachers for what they're doing, because when we are talking about teachers who have been teaching concurrently this entire year, our fine arts teachers and other singletons have certainly been doing that and doing an amazing job. And I also want to extend a congratulations to Roosevelt High School as they advance their football team advances. This is exciting when you think about the culture of the school. This is still a relatively new school. So they've gone from being that school that we're hesitant to go here, to this school that has worked so hard to create and embrace just a culture of greatness. And my hat goes off to every person who works at the school, who has worked at the school, and to an extraordinarily supportive parent community. Rollsville goes above and beyond to reach the students, not only in the Rollsville area, but their student population that is in Raleigh as well. They just go above and beyond to try to reach every student. So it's great to see their efforts. I wish them the best of luck this Friday. And on that note, there's a quote, and I'm sorry, I don't know who to give this to, but just because someone carries it well does not mean it isn't heavy. And when I think about the way our educators just make this look like an easy, a seamless thing, or when parents say to us, well, our school's doing just fine, and you know the efforts behind that. And I want people to think that. I want them to think everything's just fine. That's what we want our children and our families to feel. But to know the weight that is being carried, and not just our teachers and the people in our schools, but I have to acknowledge how the last few weeks have been so difficult for our Black and brown families. And I have been holding everyone in my heart and in my prayers. Because when someone says it's not a good time to bring up racism, or it's not a good time to talk about it, or there's more important things, clearly we have seen it's something we need to continually address, acknowledge, and do better for each other. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Scott. Ms. Johnson-Hosler.
Thank you. I had not planned to say this, but Ms. Scott did a great job talking about Roseville, so I have to talk about my newest high school. While they did not advance their varsity team to the playoffs, we're a 3-year-old South Garner High School, and they actually won the JV team won their division football, which is major ordeal for a brand new high school who technically doesn't really have but a few 18-year-olds. Especially for those of us who are sports enthusiasts who spend a lot of time at football games. And I was glad to be back at a football game on Friday, I have to say. Surprisingly, I wasn't clear on how much I missed high school athletics, and looking forward to all of our performing arts that will be coming up. It's a reminder that it's been a long, hard year for our students and our teachers who've pushed through, but you could see their fans also very, very glad to be back, win or lose. And so it's just been amazing. And by fans, I don't even mean just our parents. I mean the communities that were able to get tickets. The wraparound support is still very clear for Wake County Public Schools, and a reminder that my soul needed to see and experience, that we are still greatly loved. And to that, I had my first event outside of a school as a school board member last week with the Garner Economic Development Corporation, and I had not realized I had not been to a public meeting representing the school system until I walked into the room, and I was like, I'm so excited to see people, and we all were, and it was very interesting. And then we were trying to figure out, all the COVID regulations, but you heard me talk about the Garner community earlier, and the late Mayor Williams forgot to give me my key to Garner, but I still know in my heart that he says I have a key to Garner. Garner and my hometown vied for the greatest town in America, so we have a little love rivalry between us, but it's truly been a home to me and the people there, and that's exactly how I felt on last Thursday when the Garner Economic Development Corporation introduced their first $250,000 endowment for South Garner High School student and a Garner High School student, and it was absolutely full of community support and the love that they will have. The endowment is not fully invested yet, but this year, one student per high school will receive $2,200, which, as President Rollins says, is a full ride to Wake Tech Community College. So it was exciting also being in the space with President Rollins and Chair Calabria to celebrate the partnership between the school district, Wake Technical Community College, the county, and the town of Garner. So for families who go to South Garner or Garner High School, the application is due April 30th, and the beautiful thing about Wake Tech is, guess what? They even help you write your essay, which I think is an amazing gift to give a student. When you're applying for school, the essays are overwhelming for students and parents, and so it's a gift that they are giving, that any student applying to the application can use their writing center to help develop their application. So for me, no matter which two students get it, every student that gets involved is getting a huge gift from Wake Tech Community College to help write those essays, which, like I said, is sometimes a barrier for families and scholarships, is getting their students to write those essays. And for a student who did fairly well in high school, I was also pleased to see that the GPA is 2.5, because it is a reminder that a 2.5, although in this day and age says to a student that they have not done exceptionally well in high school, this is an example of being committed to all of our students and meeting them where they are and helping them be and meet their successes. So it was a great time, and every single person in that room is excited to be committed to our students and our school system. And as one of the town council members said, is yet another example of their commitment to Wake County Public Schools. And I think that's important for all of us as board members to hear, is what we mostly hear is the loud hard work, and we don't really get to hear community support very directly say to us that we are still their first and best choice. And so it was great to be in a space with people who really value their partnership with Wake County Public Schools. And so, again, thank you to the town of Garner, all of their leadership, and the Garner Economic Development Corporation, which, as you can imagine, because it's Garner and people don't leave there, everybody there had children who went through Wake County Public Schools as well, and we're lamenting about how great this would have been for their now adult children. As one person says, his kids are older than me, but he still wishes that this would have been an opportunity. So again, thanks to Garner. And you heard Ms. Kushner mention, again, Dr. Martin mentioned the statistics. It's important that we continue to encourage people to take their shot. And the event in Garner is actually right across the street from Creech Road School, which I think is important because that is a community where people still live near their school, and so it'll be easily accessible. So we'll make sure that not just our staff who may not have gotten their shots, who haven't been back in buildings, but families and communities around there. It will be at Solid Rock Church, which is on Creech Road, on April 23rd and May 21st from 4 to 8, and at Roberts Park on April 29th and May 27th from 9 to 3. Again, Activate Good, the NAACP, multiple Greek organizations are involved in this endeavor, and I think the structure here tells us that this is a community who cares about their community. They created, no matter what your work schedule looks like, they ensure that they have times for people to take their shot. And again, it's just a reminder of the yeoman's work and labor that the Wake County public school staff did to get people their shots as well. So we know what kind of work and effort it takes to do that. So we're glad to have amazing community partners who are also making sure that the school system are able to share this with our communities and our families that are near these locations. And of course, people can drive to them, but certainly our communities that live near those locations, hopefully they will attend as well. I will also say, I have to say this because I actually think I said it to a board member. Mr. Drew Cook and Mr. Paul Coe, hats off to you and your team. I thought I was the last BAC when I heard Dr. Martin say that. I mean, they have totally been on the round robin of a nine BAC tour. So thank you and your team for working late, answering the questions. And it's funny because we're all so different, so they can't even prepare for the questions because all of our districts and families have so many different questions to ask. So I wanted to personally thank them for going on a tour of 9 BACs, and you can give a heads up to the budget committee of what it's going to be like going on your 9 BAC tour. But again, thank you for all the staff for the work that they do, not just for us sitting at this table to ensure that we're informed, but the fact that they're willing to take their evenings and early mornings for our BACs to ensure that our families have the opportunity to ask questions as well. And then I'd be remiss because mine are always in the evening, and every time I look at my principals' faces, I feel guilty that they're working late in my BAC. But they always show up, they smile, they participate. So again, thank you to all of our administrators who are also on this BAC tour with our staff to ensure that they are showing their support, not just in their school buildings, but in their community as well. And again, I'd be remiss if I didn't say, just an hour ago, there was a life-changing decision, I believe, for this country. And no matter where people stand, we have to note that this is going to be monumental, no matter the outcome or what changes happens, because we know that there's only one outcome of a possibly lengthy process. But what it does say to me as a person is standing here saying the hard things, getting the horrific emails about me and my family are worth it at the end of the day. And I don't regret anything that I've ever said from this board table because it's always been for the greater good of every single human being. But what I will tell you is it matters. People are hearing and seeing this. It matters what we say and what we don't say. And so I think for our young people, hopefully this will be a modicum of hope for all of them, regardless of where they stand on it. But hope that even though systems are broken, sometimes they do surprise you. And the bigger piece of that is ensuring that we continue to support our young people to ask hard questions, push the envelope, because ultimately no great decision comes without dissension and disagreement to really arrive. For those of you who worked under my leadership while I was board chair, I always told you the disagreement and the chaos is the sweet spot. It is when we all agree on one accord that you get people providing groupthink. And I think what we just saw is a country not choosing to use groupthink, but to push back, have hard conversations, and come to an outcome that could very well change, but an outcome that reflects the masses of people who've spoken. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson-Hostler. Mrs. Cash.
I don't want to follow that very much, but I'll say a couple things. But that was well said. I appreciate that. And all of those words meant a lot, and it is a big decision, and I'm glad you brought it up, as you always do a good job of. And also, you make me smile when you talk about your community, because that's a big thing, and I'm glad that you talked a lot about that as well. I'll just quickly say, because I can't follow that act, that I've had a great school visits, and Christine and I have kept Chris McCabe and Dr. Council really, really, really busy, and so we are in competition. But I have finished up, and I think it might be. I think I'll start another round of visits. And but as I go on these visits to these schools, I've learned so much from the principals, but even the area superintendents, both of them have shown me so many things. When I go into a school that I would probably have missed, they have pointed out to me, and they've gotten to know me so well. They know when to kind of look at me and like, uh-oh, she's going to look at this, or, oh, you're going to be happy about this. And so they kind of know what my trigger points are. But it's been a really knowledgeable time with those two area superintendents and learning about why schools do things differently and what things are working and the decisions that might be coming up. And so I've gotten a lot of information. I did also want to say, Ms. Mahaffey, you made a great summarization of the Indian education. That was really good. I'll miss Mrs. Lee because her smile just makes me smile, and she will be missed. She's an awesome lady. I want to thank Ms. Kushner for talking about the 50 years that we are celebrating in integration. I feel like when I was on the board previously, I enjoyed a really good part of that, and it was a good time to be on the school board in the 90s. And so I agree with you. We have to work really hard to keep that alive. And then lastly, I'll just say my back meeting was last night, and David Nieder and Terry Kimsey and Mark Winters all came. And we got to talk about the budget, and then I did have some good input on that, actually, some questions, some really good input, too, from our principals. And then a few people wanted to stay and talk about the calendar, which meant that went on. And then Miss Gaddis had to stay for like 100 hours with me. And she, I don't know why she even lets me talk to her anymore, but she was there very late. This went on for another hour past my back meeting for the calendar discussion. So thank you, Marlo. I can't thank you enough. And so that concludes my remarks.
She should be in that list of the World BAC Tour as well.
Thank you, Mrs. Cash, for those comments. And there was one comment that I wanted to mention. I kind of forgot about it in my rush to try to move through, and I want to thank Ms. Johnson-Hostler and Mrs. Scott for their comments around racism and lifting up students. That reminded me of something that I wanted to say and talk about. You know, our slogan, "What starts here changes everything," sort of hit home for me last week. And it reminds me of the things that we teach our students and that students learn about every day that's not always and not necessarily academic, but that are life lessons. We had a student last week that suffered what I thought was a terrible and unnecessary atrocity, and that was a young man by the name of Jason Walthour, 16-year-old sophomore who attends Sanderson High School. And it was on all the news channels. I'm sure we all saw it at some point, but he was a student who was mistaken with, he was doing some drills in the street. He had a fake gun, and he was doing ROTC drills. And apparently a neighbor called the police on this young man. And I think he was either arrested or almost arrested in front of his home. And as he shared his story, there were 3 people that really struck me. I was concerned. I was really bothered by the story a lot. So he doesn't know that I'm talking about him, and he's probably been listening to a school board meeting during the spring. But Jason, if you are listening, or someone is listening that knows him, let him know that he is certainly in my thoughts, and I'm sure the thoughts of this board and those that are here in this room. It moves me to think that a young man that's one of our students had to go through something like that. So we're thinking him. I just want to lift up Jason. I want to lift up his stepfather. His stepfather is a white man, and he talked about the difficulty of him having the conversation and having to talk to his black stepson about how to encounter police and sort of having the talk, but yet him being the beneficiary of white privilege and not really knowing how, white privilege and not knowing how to talk to his black stepson about how to handle situations such as that. And the person I thought about, and probably who I think is most important or deserving in this story, and he mentioned this person. I don't know his name or her name, but it was his ROTC instructor, who probably deserves the most credit, because he talked about how he learned from his ROTC instructor that if they were approached by police or by a cop for that very reason, exactly what to do. And it was that very thing that may have, if not saved this young man's life, certainly prevented it from going left or in the wrong direction. And that was to put the rifle down, to lay his hands completely outstretched out, so that the police would know that he was not a threat. And I would contend that may have saved Jason's life. So I don't know who the ROTC instructor is at Sanderson, but thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am, for what you teach our young ROTC students in Sanderson every day. Thank you, Jason's dad, for having the courage to do what you do every day and raising a young black son. And thank you, Jason, for your courage, your boldness, for having to go through that, but also knowing what to do and doing the right thing. So I just wanted to mention that and share that story again, as I'm sure all of you all saw it, but one that was certainly in my thoughts, and I meant to mention that earlier. With that, that takes us to tonight's agenda. Before I ask for a motion to approve the agenda, I would like to move item 6A. I've had a request to move item 6A from public comment to our action agenda. That is an item dealing with the remote learning day adjustment for the 2020-2021 traditional calendar. So I'm moving item 6A on the Chief of Schools from consent to action. And with that, I would ask for a motion to approve tonight's meeting agenda as amended.
Chair Sutton, I make a motion to approve the meeting agenda as amended.
Second.
Got a motion from Ms. Mahaffey, a second from Mrs. Kushner to approve tonight's meeting agenda as amended. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor show by sign of aye. Opposed, nay. Ayes have it. Tonight's meeting agenda is approved as amended. Next item on our agenda, want to move to our public hearing of the superintendent's proposed budget. The following citizens have submitted written comments as part of our public hearing portion of this evening's agenda regarding the superintendent's proposed budget. Their comments are linked on the same online agenda that we're using for tonight's meeting. That agenda can be found at the district's website at wcpss.net under the tab labeled School Board. We have tonight 2 written comments from members of the public that were submitted regarding the budget. Those were from Crystal Ingram and Fernando Martinez. In addition, we've got one additional speaker who is here in person tonight regarding the superintendent's proposed budget and wishes to speak on that, and that is Lynn Edmonds. Ms. Edmonds?
Good evening. Is this good or? Yeah. My name is Lynn Edmonds, and I'm speaking tonight on behalf of Great Schools in Wake. Great Schools in Wake supports the superintendent's proposed budget. It's a modest ask this year, one that county commissioners should welcome and fund. We know the county is in much better financial condition than was expected a year ago. We also know that our students and teachers need every dollar proposed in this budget. We know they need much, much more. Hopefully, our state leaders will provide additional support with a budget that invests in children. While this budget proposed by Superintendent Moore doesn't get us where we need to be with things like a nurse in every school or enough school counselors, social workers, and school psychologists, it does underscore that critical need. Finally, our commitment to you is that we will next go to the county commissioners and ask that they fully fund this request. While the state's commitment to our public schools remains woefully inadequate, our county leaders have an obligation to partner with you and show up for Wake's children. Thank you, and it's good to see you all again.
Thank you, Ms. Edmonds. Good to see you as well.
Chair Sutton, excuse me, but I think it would be appropriate to indicate the topic of Ms. Ingram and Mr. Fernandez. I'm sorry, Mr. Martinez comments. Both their public comments were encouraging increased funding for the social and emotional support component to the budget, and sort of specifically for crisis intervention and whatnot. So I just thought it was important that the content of their comments be highlighted.
Thank you, Dr. Martin. I don't have that information in front of me, so I appreciate you lifting that up. Thank you, sir. All right. Well, again, we had 3 speakers there. The 2 written comments. I'm sorry, 1 speaker and then 2 written comments. So those were the public comments for tonight's public hearing for the budget, and that concludes that hearing. That now takes us to our regular public comment. Again, the following citizens have submitted written comments as part of our public comment portion of this evening's agenda. Their comments as well are linked on the same online agenda we're using for tonight's meeting, which can be found at our website, wcpss.net, under the tab labeled School Board. We have 1 written comment from the public, and that speaker, or that written comment, was provided by Poppy McNearney on the topic of the virtual academy. And then we have 2 speakers that are present with us tonight in person to share their public comments. And so the first is Tara Dean. And Ms. Dean, there are wipes and things there if you so need.
Sorry, I'm a little shorter. Apparently, common sense has gone out the window along with education in our schools. Now we are left with an administration.
I'm sorry. Can I ask you to put your mask back on, please?
Okay.
Thank you. Sorry about that. Thank you.
Okay. Now we are left with an administration whose only concern is appeasing COVID critics who are using the pandemic to further their radical causes. The school's #1 priority is upholding a ridiculous set of unnecessary and unproven COVID protocols and restrictions. Our children are no longer allowed to have a runny nose due to seasonal allergies, headaches from computers or whiteboards. An upset stomach may be caused by not eating, something they ate, or even nerves. They know if they display any symptoms, or even worse, admit to having any of these symptoms, they will immediately be sent home for 10 days or until they can provide a negative COVID test. After all they have been through, is it really necessary to put this additional burden on them? Are we in turn setting them up to hide their feelings or even fib to avoid the consequences they oppose? My daughter's stories are only 2 examples of the many children who have fallen victim to Wake County Public School System COVID protocols. My 6-year-old is in an isolated special ed class with multiple disabilities. She was sent home because she spit up her chocolate milk right after drinking it, which was likely caused by her habit of gagging herself. It occurred once. She had no fever, was showing 0 signs of any sickness. I followed protocol even though everyone knew she was not sick. I waited at FastMed for 1.5 hours for her to be tested, which included her screaming, crying, and being held down. When I emailed the school her negative COVID results, I was told it wasn't sufficient because it was a rapid test and not PCR, so she would have to wait 10 days. After speaking with the doctor and further research, the school was in fact wrong, and the test was PCR, and they had to accept it. If I didn't go the extra step, my daughter not only would have missed 10 days of school, but 10 days of important therapies that she receives while there. My other daughter is in middle school with a long history of social anxiety that has worsened due to the prolonged school closing. She's been having anxiety attacks at school that have now been compounded by the fear that she can no longer go to a teacher or the front office and say she isn't feeling well. She used to feel comfort in knowing that I could pick her up if needed, but now she's afraid to answer questions about feeling sick. Instead, she goes to the bathroom and cries or texts me. It is truly heartbreaking, especially when you know her mental health is not being prioritized. At what point does school become about children and education again? Right now, every aspect of school is revolving around unrealistic protocols based on greatly unfounded, inconsistent data that even the schools don't know how to interpret or apply. These draconian standards being enforced out of fear rather than sound, common-sense policy only highlight that there is no principal leadership at the Board of Education level. The board was selected to stand up for our children, not dictate absurd standards. I ask that you do just that by making an immediate and concise plan to change these preposterous policies. Children may experience a range of symptoms on any given day that aren't COVID-related, and they should not be penalized. In instances when decisions do need to be made, they need to be done by actual experts, primary care physicians.
Thank you.
Would you like to respond?
No, we don't make it a practice of responding to public comment. We're just here to listen.
Okay.
Thank you. Holly Higgins Wilcher.
Hello. Hello, my name is Dr. Holly Higgins Wilcher. I'm a child development specialist with extensive education in biological sciences, master's degree in child development and family studies, expertise in early childhood mental health, a doctorate in education policy and leadership. I publicly share these credentials only for the sake of the merit that I hope they carry with the nature of my remarks, as I speak to you wearing a hat of both social scientist and concerned parent of a child in the Wake County school system. As a Wake County parent of a child in your schools, I'm grateful for your leadership in offering in-person schooling this year. Thank you. You have shown perseverance and resilience in your navigation of what must be a daunting time to be in K-12 education. And I just have to say I could feel the heart of every one of you as you spoke this evening for the children. And I channel Ms. Johnson's spirit today in her remarks. I now invite you to bravely build on that leadership by considering the policy of unmasking our children because we know the following to be true. Number one, children are by and large not carriers of SARS-CoV-2 virus and not drivers of what has been identified as subsequent COVID transmission. Dr. Walter Gilliam and his recent research show that in a study of several thousand young children, and several recent studies have reiterated these findings, they are not transmitters of this disease. Regardless of mask policy, we would expect to see limited transmission in schools and from children to adults. There is ample science and peer-reviewed meta-analytic research to support these findings. What has been identified as COVID is less dangerous to children than the seasonal flu, not to mention other everyday risks we accept as a normal part of a child's life. Number three, masks are at best credibly disputed as a legitimate, efficacious virus mitigation measure by decades of quality research as well as observed results of mask mandates around the world, and at worst, possibly dangerous to children. In fact, if you look at the medical literature, Dr. Neil Orr's and dozens of credible studies show masks ineffective in hospitals and preventing infection and preventing the spread of disease. And as far as the possibly dangerous part, we decided with good reason, research, rational logic, and thought several years ago across the country to ban the use of masks for even an hour of one school day during Halloween celebrations. The science that warranted this decision still stands today. The evidence is ample, although not what you will hear in mainstream news requiring children to cover their faces is psychologically as well as physically damaging to young children. We know that on average, children wearing facial coverings are breathing anywhere from 30 to 70% more carbon dioxide than they would without facial coverings. This is concerning for many reasons. However, I'll focus on the neurobiological reasons. The amygdala is a chemnosensor for fear, which triggers carbon dioxide release into the blood, otherwise known as acidosis. And this chronic long-term effects of fear on the brain, oxygen deprivation, and acidosis in the bloodstream are deleterious to our young children's neurobiological development. This is okay for the brain to be in the brainstem for a short period of time, but this flight or fight causes toxic stress over the long term. Am I done? Sorry. Okay. Thank you so much for your leadership. I appreciate your time tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Wiltshire. All right, that concludes our public comment for the evening. Again, thank you those both that submitted written, and thank you speakers for being here tonight. That takes us to the information item portion of our agenda under the renowned superintendent's piece. So Superintendent Moore, I'll turn over to you and let you introduce our guests.
Good evening again, Chair Sutton and board members. This evening, we are bringing you an information item that will be presented by Bonner Gaylord, who is the Chief Operating Officer with Kane Realty Corporation. I was able to sit in on a presentation a couple of months ago that's similar to the information that you will receive this evening around just understanding and learning about some of the vision and goals of the Downtown South project in our community. And Bonner is here this evening he has a presentation. We have a staff member that will be driving it on the screen, and he will provide an overview of that work. Bonner, welcome.
Thank you for having me this evening. So I am Bonner Gaylord. I'm representing the Downtown South Development team. And on a personal level, I'm the proud father of twin boys who are 10 years old in fourth grade at Root Elementary, and a daughter who is 13 going on 30 at Oberlin Middle School. And I myself am a graduate of Hunter, Ligon, and Broughton. And while I do have surgery on my shoulder for an old Wake County Public School football injury, the rest of what I took away from my experiences were incredibly positive. And I am a firm believer in the public school system. It was probably the most transformational experience of my life, and I'm just grateful for the work you all do to enable that, and for my kids, for me, and for the many hundreds of thousands of kids that have come through and will continue to come through the school system. So thank you all so much for your work. You all don't get thanked enough, and I know what y'all do is incredibly hard. I was on the city council for 8 years. I think it's because I didn't have the stuff to do the school board. Whatever y'all got, I don't have it. So just to introduce the project, what the purpose of today is to give an overview of the project and determine whether there are opportunities to explore collaborative efforts that could bring together the government sector, the academic sector, the nonprofit sector, and the private sector to accomplish more than any individual entity or group of entities could accomplish themselves. And so I think as I go through the presentation, I'm just going to let y'all know what we're planning on doing and take any questions if you all have them. So I guess we can go with the slide. Next slide, please. So downtown South is 135 acres that constitutes the southern gateway into Raleigh's downtown. It's in 3 parcels that intersect the Beltline and South Saunders. And I'm going to move pretty fast, and you all have this presentation so you can read some of the more finer details. Next slide. Raleigh is growing. It's on all the top 10 lists. It's considered one of the top Zoom boom cities, and we know people are moving here. We know that we are in a high growth environment because we're an incredible community and because we have an incredible school system. And so how are we going to continue to meet the needs of the influx of students that we know that we're going to experience and if anything, accelerate through post-COVID? Next slide. Just a rough approximation of the schedule. In 2021, we're going to be working on the entitlements and getting all the subdivision approvals and things like that. We're going to be working on a phase 0, which is building out the warehouses and upfitting those to create an amenity for the neighborhood. And then beginning in 2022, we're going to start with the phase 1 verticals, and that constitutes about 6 projects that will be staggered by a few months, but we anticipate a significant amount of investment coming in 2022. Next slide. It's going to be about 2.2 million square feet of office, 3,000 residential units, about 300,000 square feet of retail, and about 1,500 hotel keys. Total investment of about $2 billion. Next slide. This is that first phase that I referenced earlier that constitutes about 6 projects, and that is representative. These buildings are not designed. All these are artists' conceptuals, but this gives a flavor and feel of the first phase of downtown South. Next slide. We started this development with values driving our efforts. And we asked ourselves, what are the core tenets? What are the core values that we hold on to and we're going to ensure are expressed throughout the development? And those are to create a district, not a development, to lean into nature, to physically connect, and to partner early and often. Next slide. With creating a district and not a development, we see that developments are fixed and final, and they're set for a specific person, for a specific user, and districts evolve over time. They allow others to plug in and participate. They create public spaces. They allow for evolution over time and for a area to improve as conditions change. Next slide. Several of the ideas we're exploring with respect to that tenet is creative incubation spaces for business, music, and technology, B Corp partners, indoor and outdoor entertainment venues. We're looking to work with Hub Raleigh's Main Street program, which supports minority and women-owned businesses, permanent and temporary public art inclusion, and public open space. All of those things intending to draw people in and create opportunities and pathways to opportunities for people who live in the surrounding neighborhoods and others within Wake County. Next slide. This lays out our Track C, and this shows a full development plan of one of these tracks. And you'll see in there's a main drag that comes into towards the potential entertainment and sports venue that crosses a bridge park and would create a retail and restaurant lively environment. Number 2 is a Woo North concept, which is creating a waterfront and utilizing the Walnut Creek as an amenity and not just as a drainage ditch, and plugging into the greenway there and allowing public activity and park space fronting that Walnut Creek. We also, this shows the Bridge Park, as I mentioned, the incredible greenway connectivity that comes through the site, additional pedestrian bridge, a stadium plaza, as well as the entertainment and sports venue itself, which catalyzes many of the opportunities that we have before us. Next slide. Here's a map showing the phase one in the context of the full build-out. And so this represents the approximately $2 billion of investment that will go into this area and create many millions of dollars of new taxes that don't exist there today. Next slide. Here's a finer detail on the Woonorf concept and how a waterfront and an engaging public environment would look in this context. Next slide. We plan on including experiential art throughout the development. We've already committed to that in a firm way with rezoning conditions that are applied to the site. Next slide. We also build with pedestrian-friendly environments in mind. For districts to be truly accessible, they need to be accessible by bike, ped, wheelchair, car, whatever mode of transportation someone might use, and this site affords us the opportunity to broaden that access and to create engaging physical environments. Studies have shown that every 4 seconds someone needs to see something interesting in order to create a nice pedestrian experience, a nice environment. And with the density that downtown South is going to bring, we can create an incredible street atmosphere. Next slide. Sports and entertainment is a huge driver and opportunity. As you all know, we have the world champion Carolina Courage right here, and to provide them a venue that is respective of their true talents is part of the opportunity, and showing pathways to success through sports and entertainment, and particularly our music industry. I've heard in talking with folks around town about how challenging it is for kids who want to get into the music business. They have to go to Nashville or LA or New York or Atlanta. And we could be creating that here and creating those pathways to opportunity and using that to teach other life lessons. Next slide. Again, here's some more detail on the current champs and who we have right in our backyard. Next slide. There's also, in addition to the entertainment and sports venue, there's an outdoor plaza that can be used as public space or meeting space or for smaller events. And there's clearly opportunities for shared resources here throughout. Next slide. We also have contemplated an iconic indoor venue that would be a VR gaming venue. We know that e-gaming is growing to a $500 billion industry by 2023, and we have incredible e-gaming industry here in our area that could be a draw for the 4,000 plus e-gaming pro sports tournaments that happen every year. Next slide. The second tenet is a lean into nature, and that is two-part. One, respecting the natural environment and showing how a built environment can positively interact with the natural environment, and then using that to educate kids on how stormwater infrastructure works, what green stormwater infrastructure is and what it does, and how our natural environment can be enhanced by the correct and best practice of how to build a city and how to build a community. Next slide. Some of those ideas are how to restore Walnut Creek, activating the wetlands with park space, LEED and well building certifications, green roofs, cisterns, solar roofs. The Woonorf design, as I mentioned, the integrating ecological education, which we've already committed to as part of our rezoning as well, along with green stormwater infrastructure, and a fund to fund off-site green stormwater infrastructure projects that are within the corridor. We've already dedicated up to $2.5 million for those efforts. Next slide. The Raleigh Greenway comes through the site and is a phenomenal connection opportunity, as you'll see here in a few slides later. Next slide. We also intend to build green and to use those opportunities for education as well. Next slide. The third tenet is to physically connect, and that means to connect to nature and parks and connect to roads around and allow for that access for all, as I mentioned earlier. Next slide. Several of those ideas it's creating a new gateway for Raleigh, our capital city. It brings bus rapid transit through the site, and there is a bus rapid transit stop planned for the site itself. Long term, the interchange is going to grow, and there's opportunities there. And then it's clearly an incredible destination along Raleigh's Greenway and Wake County's Greenway that can be a way to draw people to the Greenway and help people get outside and live healthier lives. Next slide. There's a many surrounding parks, which first and foremost of which in size is Dorothea Dix Park to the north, which is redeveloping and would be a lot of opportunity for connection there as well. Next slide. And here's a plan of the Dix Park if you all haven't seen it. Next slide. Centennial Campus connection opportunities with Centennial Campus not far from the site. The industry and academia coming together to create what they do at Centennial Campus is a perfect opportunity to connect with downtown South and have a different environment. Next slide. The Greenway connectivity is incredible through this site, and our Greenway network can serve as a transportation network with some enhancements, and we would hope to set an example of how the Greenway might be lit and enhanced with educational opportunities to make it more of an amenity for our community. Next slide. The transit connectivity here is phenomenal. There's bus, rail, bus rapid transit, bike ped, and vehicular connections going through the site like a spaghetti network of connections, which clearly indicates that this site is accessible and is a site that no one should feel excluded from. Next slide. The 540 extension will continue to build out that connectivity. Next slide. And the last tenet is to partner early and often. And we know that we certainly don't have all the answers and certainly can't accomplish the things that we want to do for our community without a large number of partnerships. And that's part of the reason why I'm here today and why we've been working to build coalitions and community partners to try and stretch what we are going to do much further for the benefit of the public. We can go and do our development and everything can proceed as normal. And I'll say that at a certain period of time, when the land begins to be subdivided and sold off, this opportunity for a collaborative approach goes away. And it's not often that we have $2 billion of investment coming, that we can harness some of that for additional public benefit. Next slide. We're exploring ideas of environmental health, ecological and social sciences education spaces, on-site learning facility in a downtown setting, a STEAM center at downtown South, an apprenticeship with on-site businesses through WakeWorks, the food, beverage, and beyond, a recruitment and enrollment center, immediate access to tech and startup companies, and further, an opportunity for kids to be learning in an environment where they can watch what they're learning come into being. The opportunities for education on the site and the various disciplines that will be brought to bear on the site are endless, and we hope worth exploring. Next slide. Here's a list of our current partners. I'm very proud to say half of those are minority women-owned businesses. They're national and local, predominantly local, and we look to continue to build those partnerships. Next slide. So I'll read this last one because I think it states truly where we're coming from. This district is founded on the belief that humans are better together. We invite you to share in the innovation and inspiration that will show the world that coming together fuels human progress. Next slide. And so this is the overall development, as I mentioned. We are here at the table wanting to explore how we can benefit our community to the maximum, knowing what we are going to do, knowing what we are going to invest, and knowing the opportunities that other cities have taken advantage of for the benefit of kids, for the benefit of those who need a hand up. And that's what we're here today to hope to explore with you all. So that's it. And any questions?
Bonner, thank you for being here. Welcome, first of all. Thank you for being here, and we appreciate the opportunity to hear from you and hear more about this project. I'm assuming that you're willing to entertain some questions or thoughts?
Absolutely.
Okay. Mrs. Kushner, I'll start with you.
Thank you, Chair Sutton, and thank you, Mr. Gaylord, for being here. It's exciting to get more details about something we've been hearing about, so thank you for making yourself available. We usually don't get folks presenting developments to us. But you know, you noted that it's $2 billion, and the budget that we're looking at today for the Wake County Public School System for our year is approaching $2 billion. So we're on scale with your project. One thing, and to reiterate that we are, as I appreciated your opening comments about Root and Oberlin, we are part of, we are the economic drivers, a key economic driver in this community. So I appreciate you wanting to partner with us, and I think it would be helpful if on some of your maps, and I do love maps, if we could make sure that you're aware and your project is aware of the schools that are near already, our Wake County Public Schools that are in and around your project, that you could bring in to that we don't need to build a new school per se. I know Superintendent Moore has mentioned that as a possibility, but we have schools downtown already that you could tap into and make sure that our students are connected to this project, not just those schools but beyond, but to know that we're shovel ready with our schools, right? And the one concern that I've heard in the community is that any tax abatements, whatever they're called, would be long-term, and that would impact our county partners and their tax base. If you could speak to that, does it need to be long-term? Can there be more short-term impacts instead of having, that's the one thing that gives me a lot of pause, is having any long-term absence of tax dollars that in the end are key parts of our budget.
To the first question, we certainly are, we're here to explore what might be the right partnership to engage in with one another. And we certainly are interested in the surrounding schools and what, I went to 2 of them. And so there's a desire to make connections overall, but I also think that there is a much greater opportunity for learning in the context of an environment like downtown South. I was studying, actually, I was pre-med coming out of Broughton and went to UNC and was in a biology class that studied mice and showed, it was an experiment for the late 60s where they had mice in this utopian mouse habitat, and all the mice were thriving, and it was just beautiful. And then they would change the conditions in the habitat, and some of the mice would go into the corner and shiver, and some of the mice would attack the other mice, and there was all these social problems coming from a habitat that wasn't right for the mice. And that made me think about habitats for humans and what are the best habitats that we can create for humans. And we generally accept that vertically integrated, walkable, mixed-use environments create opportunities for connection and community that extend further than other environments. And so with that in mind, there is an incredible opportunity for a downtown environment to host a school that could teach lessons that others may not be able to teach. The second question is in terms of the funding, whether there is a discussion of, we're bringing $2 billion of private dollars to the table, which will create new taxes, which the county and the city decide where they go, whether it goes to the schools or to somewhere else. They make that decision. So that would be a community conversation, which we've put on the table already as a potential opportunity, but there's many different ways to partner and fund, whether it's city bonds, county bonds, whether there's TIFs or TIGs. There's a lot of tools out there. The analogy that I've used that I think is helpful is talking about any one of those tools without the context of the full partnerships available is like defending the sugar refineries when you want to know if someone wants a piece of cake. Whether it's sugar or brown sugar or cane sugar or honey, what ultimately matters is the end opportunity in the product. And that's where I think exploring what that ultimate opportunity will dictate what tools may be used to accomplish it.
Thank you again for coming here tonight. You need to partner with our public schools, so I appreciate that you're here. Thank you.
Mr. Haggerty.
Thank you. Turn around to get to the mic.
Yeah.
Bonner, I appreciate you coming and giving us this great presentation. But, as you know, right, when you have a big project, there's a lot of other costs that come with it. And I understand your point about not wanting to narrow down too tightly into like one aspect of it and miss the big picture. I mean, I get that. But at the same time, if you come in promising too much without an explanation, then the obvious question is, what's it going to cost us, right? And so just with what you showed, and as dynamic and visionary as that development is, there will be public costs with it, and I don't know if there's cost share. I don't know, like all of the ideas when you talk about like new greenways, new parks, new roads, new bus routes, how much of that will be public infrastructure versus how much of that will be something that the developer pays for. And so just like as you talk about it and go to the community, if you can kind of help us understand, I understand it'll be a big project, property values will go up, we'll have more revenue coming in, but then there's different ways you're financing it. Just, if you can explain a little bit better, maybe some of these partnerships and sort of how we get to where you want to go.
Yeah, and I think I can maybe explain that by noting that through the entitlement process and all the citizen engagement that we did, connected with thousands of individuals and grassroots to leaders in the community, and heard a lot of requests for what downtown South should be, and we heard it needs to be respective of the context in which it's built, and not just pulling North Hills, which we're known for developing, and dropping that into downtown South. And there's a clear, and that is not our intention at all. It is going to have its own unique character in every way. However, the general nature, we will be able to do the development regardless. It's not going to look like North Hills, but it's going to look kind of like those images. And that includes building all the roads, includes building all the infrastructure. It includes significant contributions to the city and the county through impact fees and what it takes to actually pull a building permit. So all those costs are already understood to be private costs. What we're talking about is how do we get that additional layer? How do we can do what we do, and you can look around at developments all over the country and see what we would do. And we're in a market economy, and we can do market things. And if we want to do more, then it's going to take additional partnerships. And so when we're building a park, which we've already obligated ourselves to do, what's included in that park and how it could interface with a school and what programmatic components would be beneficial to the school, those are decisions that we can make now. We can't make them, in a year or so, but we can guide how those private investments are made to meet public investments and create a 1 + 1 = 3 scenario where all of our dollars are stretched further.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Ms. Johnson-Hostler.
Thank you. I appreciate the mouse analogy, because that's certainly kind of my question, is when we start to create the transition for us, and I think you were here earlier when you heard several of our board members talk about our own commitment to diversity. I mean, clearly we can't have this conversation without noting any changes you make are going to impact the current living environment there, which directly impacts how we create diversity in our school system. So I'll just echo what you've already heard my colleagues say, is the importance of not just what the academic intent and relationship looks like, but what the intent is going to be and impact actually in our school buildings. The other piece of that for me is affordable housing is a huge piece that we've talked to all of our municipalities and county about, and so for me, that's got to be built into this conversation around diversity. And to be clear, I live in Raleigh, not in the city limits, so my understanding has been very tangential, but for me, the investment in this conversation is very specific to the impact that gentrification and change of community landscape has directly on our schools, especially our downtown schools, because they're magnet schools built for, as you well know, built for clear intentions, and we felt the change, and this is just going to shift the change a little bit more, and so we just said, hey, we got to go back to have this philosophical conversation we've been having as a board. So clearly I see this as an important part of that conversation. So in addition to the ways in which it helps our students academically, I hope that you take back to your partners that it's also going to impact what our buildings look like on the inside, and this current board's commitment to maintaining very diverse schools will absolutely be impacted by a project like this.
Absolutely, and you noted my experiences at Hunter and Ligon, and one of the key lessons I learned was that distance breeds fear and proximity breeds care. And I know that was very true for me, and I think there are opportunities for that to be true for other kids, and for other kids to have success. And one of the minority women business partnerships is a key component of our overall program. We naturally do about 10%, but that can be much greater. And so for kids in the surrounding neighborhoods to be seeing successful people that look like them working right there and have internships and have connections with those folks is I think, an opportunity that, or I know, an opportunity that there's a lot of kids don't get to see.
Dr. Martin.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing a little bit more about the project. I'd like to push out some of the same ideas that the last couple of comments my colleagues have made. I mean, you mentioned that you want to be different than North Hills and that you want to understand more about integrating into the existing community. And I didn't really hear a lot about the existing community in your presentation. I'd like to hear a little bit more about that. I love good development, and I know the connection between structure and function. I think that's something we've learned a lot about here in the Wake County Public School System, because the schools that we're building today are places that look like I want to go to be educated. The structure impacts the function, and I hear that very much in what you're talking about in your development. But I hear a lot of your words: access, accessible, connect. I heard a lot about connecting to nature and parks, but I didn't hear about connecting to the community, which I'd like to hear a little bit more about. I heard your language that no one should be excluded. I can tell you that I can look at the pictures and know that my professional self could now afford to buy a ticket to a soccer game. My professional self could afford to eat dinner in these places. My growing up self is not dissimilar to some of the Southeast Raleigh neighborhoods where I grew up in Southern California. And I know that I would have looked at that and said, I can't go there. So this is a challenge of lots of development, and particularly development related to incentives, because incentives are for the new guy coming in, whereas the long-time community, the long-time business person, the long-time investor doesn't get that same advantage of the incentive. So you knew this problem in the city council. You see it all over the place, the problem with incentives and development. So help me understand your thoughts, your planning to truly make it accessible so that me, the kid growing up, would look at this and say this is accessible and not untouchable. Because everything you presented so far, me growing up self would have looked at it as untouchable. Can you reflect on that tension?
Yeah.
Because that's what we're going to need for going forward. It relates to this discussion about the schools in the area.
Yeah, well, I can certainly address that, and this is intended to be a development that is accessible for all, and I very much mean that. We've already committed to 10% affordable housing within the development. There's opportunities to raise that hurdle, and through further partnerships, and really what the only thing that that the development team has on their list is an entertainment and sports venue for the purposes of elevating women's soccer here in Raleigh and in Wake County, and that also catalyzes opportunities for sports and entertainment educational inroads and creation of music industry professionals, whether that's partnership with Wake Tech or other entities. There are true pathways there. We also noted the Raleigh Founded's Main Street program that works to cultivate minority and women-owned business retail storefronts, and those are opportunities as well. So whether it's office space utilization, retail restaurant space utilization, could be concept kitchens or co-working spaces. There's been discussion about a music-driven co-working space, innovation center. All of those are opportunities, and all the inroads and access that you note are our goals as well. And we've committed to the ones that we can commit to already, which are affordable housing and green stormwater infrastructure, and making sure to protect the neighborhood. And I'll note as well that there's two homes on the site, one of which is abandoned, one of which is occupied rent-free by one individual. So in terms of displacement, there's one individual who currently isn't paying any rent who will need to move when the development gets underway, but that's the only displacement. Of course, whenever there's investment follows investment. Real estate is location, location, location. So when you put something that where people want to be, then they want to be there, and the prices around it go up. And to mitigate that, there's three pathways. It's education about tax relief programs, education about predatory real estate practices and investors from California who are mailing out letters all across the United States. And if someone takes the bait, they may end up getting taken advantage of, and letting people know they need an attorney, they need a real estate agent, they need professional guidance. And then lastly is for gentrification is the direct provision of affordable housing. And that's neither one of those is a silver bullet, but those are the three opportunities to mitigate the change that is going to happen.
Do you foresee yourselves as potentially even providing some of those legal and real estate services? Because you can tell me, go get a lawyer, and I'm going to look at you and laugh and say, yeah, who's going to pay for it? How am I going to make that contact? So do you see yourselves as potentially being that intermediary as part of that education. In other words, don't just tell me, help me.
Yeah, I think that example would be bringing on another partner. You know, I've got a real estate broker's license, but I don't use it, and I'm not the guy that wants to be given advice on what people should be doing. However, the Realtors Association, for example, might be a partner that could be brought in to work on that educational component and connect with agents and give people resources that they wouldn't otherwise have. So the actual delivery of such services, I don't know who would deliver it, but that's what partnerships are about, is building a coalition that can accomplish all these myriad programmatic and capital opportunities.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. White. Mrs. Scott.
Thank you. And I appreciate that you acknowledge there's only one family directly displaced, but of course the risk exists for all of the surrounding communities. And I'm glad to hear that you said there's a plan for education to help educate residents that don't sell your house, although a lot of these properties might not be owned by the people who are living in them right now. And so I think if there are plans to avoid displacement, to how you are going to mitigate, if there are more concrete plans, I think that would absolutely offer more comfort. Ms. Johnson-Hostler mentioned, it's not just about offering affordable housing on site and being committed to that. It's also, there's that fine balance. Gentrification to a tiny extent can sometimes have a positive impact, but it cannot be at the expense of displacing people who have lived in the community and the surrounding areas forever. And that will have a direct impact on our schools, which this board is committed to integrated schools, so that it definitely is a long term. So I guess what I'm asking for is I'd love to know what kind of direct plans, and rather than, is there an opportunity to have a concrete plan with someone who is more well-versed in real estate, rather than hoping, if that's a more concrete plan that could take place. That would be something I would just personally be interested in seeing.
Yeah, well, and I'll say that the sad thing is that no city or community ever has solved the result of investment following investment, which is gentrification. And the only hope we have is to mitigate that impact. We heard from a lot of community members that when gentrification issues were lifted up, the statement was made, well, where were you when the rest of the neighborhood got gentrified? And it is a natural progression that will happen. We just need to own it and make steps to mitigate the impact and create a soft landing for folks who may not be able to deal with change at the rate that it's happening around them. And those three strategies that I laid out, I've been referencing for a year and a half now, and have not received feedback of additional pathways or additional elements, but certainly we're interested in exploring those, and we certainly we want to uplift the community, not displace the community.
Okay. Mrs. Cash.
Yeah, thanks for coming tonight. It was a good presentation. Very, very nice development. So my question is more about the school. So this may come for Superintendent Moore too. Is there a collaboration, or what is the Board of Education looking at as far as like a partnership with a school building?
So tonight is not really discussing anything particular in terms of a promise or a commitment or a direction. It's really just the board to understand what the Downtown South project is. One of the terms I think that you heard Bonner mentioned a couple of times around about community benefit. And I think in their review of what community benefit could look like, certainly one of the things that came up was public schools. And so we just had really preliminary discussions, whether it's accessing the schools that are in the community, whether or not there's space for some sort of an educational partnership, something on the site. I mean, those are like really up in the air, wispy kind of things. Tonight was really just about understanding the Downtown South project, seeing if we had questions. Anything else is down the road.
Okay, well, that's good. But I was kind of looking forward to partnering with that. But, okay, I do know about the schools in the area, too, and I definitely, there are some things I would be interested in, yeah. Thank you, though. Kathy Moore says I have to quit talking.
Mrs. Mahaffey.
Thank you. And certainly no doubt that this is a very beautiful project, and as we've tried to make our schools more reflective of the space, we can understand as a board the concept and the need of needing to fit the environment that you're in. I guess my question is, Mr. Gaylord, is Ms. Kushner asked you some questions about financing, and I think you're pretty familiar with how our schools are funded, especially at the local level. And, you referenced different sweeteners for cake, and those sweeteners matter to the flavor of the cake that we get. So if we could get a little more information on that, if you come back to us, I think that would be really important. Thank you.
Yeah, I certainly can talk through those options and which might be better for different scenarios.
And
Oh, gosh, I'm sorry. Can't tell with the mask.
Yeah, just can't.
Thank you, Ms. Mahaffey. Over here.
Oh, that's why people were pointing at me. I couldn't.
Well,
I'm
I
sorry.
think, the other
I apologize.
thing that came up as I was thinking about this is we're talking about people moving and gentrification is I had a conversation with someone who works at one of our museums downtown, and they let me know that there are families who don't believe those museums are for them. And so we have this beautiful place and space which we say is open to everyone, but there's still that barrier, that feeling that it's not for them. And so in hearing, 10% affordable housing, but, in hearing, partnerships with a potential soccer park, I'm interested in knowing how do we let folks know that there isn't a barrier there. And I think that involves reaching out to partners that exist within the community. And I'll be honest, I live, in the suburbs, and my district is in the suburbs, so I'm a little, I've been paying attention, but again, like Ms. Johnson-Hostler, it's tangentially so. So, I'd be more interested in hearing about those pieces the next time you come to visit us.
Sure.
So, Mr. Gaylord, I got a couple of just, direct questions. I represent District 4 in Southeast Raleigh, so I represent pretty much that area. It probably butts up right up to Dr. Martin, because I know he has Washington Elementary, so I'm not sure exactly where the line is, but I would imagine that some of that actually sits in my district. So my first question to you, you mentioned the values and your 4 tenets, and you've heard the spirit of the comments of all of my colleagues around diversity and inclusion. Would you be willing to include, perhaps as a 5th value, a value around inclusion? Most companies, most corporations, especially given what is going on in our world and society today, either have or expanding D&I departments and that sort of thing all the time. So I'm probably a little bit surprised that you all don't have that as a value at this point. And if D&I was a value of or one of your tenets, you probably would have saved yourself about 15 to 20 minutes of grilling from my colleagues here at this point. So is that something that you would be willing to consider adding as a particular value?
And And I think I did a poor job of expressing the fourth tenet, partner early and often, is absolutely focused on inclusion. In fact, the four tenets really map to the quadruple bottom line that many of you might be familiar with, and it's how can we have a positive return for the community from a economic standpoint, from an environmental standpoint, from a cultural standpoint, and from a social standpoint. And I differentiate those two. Cultural, how do we preserve our past? And social returns, how do we best work together going into the future, and how do we work together inclusively going forward? And that social return is what we're talking about when we talk about partner early and often. And inclusivity is represented by the half of the partners already being minority women-owned businesses, and we look to expand that. And so I really appreciate you bringing that up, because that's my deficiency, that I didn't articulate that well. But inclusion is at the core of what we're doing, and there's no way we're going to be able to accomplish this vision, and it wouldn't have a point if we weren't inclusive.
Yeah, I figured that was probably embedded in value number 4, tenet 4. Just my thought or suggestion that being more intentional and explicit about raising that as a value and calling it out I think would help, particularly as you seek to partner early and often. If potential partners saw that as an explicit value as opposed to perhaps one that's more intrinsic, that might help.
Yeah.
Just a thought or suggestion.
No, that's very helpful, because it is, and I think inclusivity is an umbrella value that touches on each of the other 4, and it needs to be just with what does inclusive environmental equity look like? Well, for us, it looked like committing $2.5 million for use off-site to fix problems we had nothing to do with, but that exist nonetheless. And as community partners, we want to help solve them, because they've been flooding historically African-American neighborhoods for many, many years now as a result of awful historical reasons. And so there is a responsibility to think about how we are eminently inclusive in everything that we do. And so I think that's great feedback, and I think that's something I'll take back to the team for sure.
My other question, and just thinking about both the comments I've heard about the displacement and the city and the county's challenge around affordable housing. You mentioned setting aside about 10% for affordable housing. If there were a school, a learning center, or what have you, and given the number of schools that are nearby, would you be willing to commit some of that affordable housing to public employees, public school employees, teachers, or what have you, to ensure that there is both the inclusion and availability and accessibility of affordable housing? I know, you sat on the city council, so I know you understand the needs of both public employees and public school employees. Is that something that you'd be willing to commit to as a partner? Just trying to add a little bit to your list. Since
Yeah, I think that's absolutely just the type of thing that we want to explore, because what we see this as, how do we meet each other's needs? We've expressed our need, entertainment and sports venue, this one item long, and the needs of the public school system, the opportunities to provide education that doesn't exist today, and to innovate. We're such an incredibly innovative region, and I think there's opportunity to leverage that innovation for innovation with private and public partnerships through the schools, and how housing might solve some of the challenges of the school system and you all's teachers and constituents. That's something that we absolutely would entertain.
I think some of our teachers would love to live downtown and be able to walk over to Washington or Hunter or Moore Square or what have you, and I doubt that there are many that can afford to live downtown right now. So, I mean, I think that also might present a particular opportunity to partner not just on the learning center or school, but also from the affordable housing standpoint as well. So I would ask, I hope that you might consider something of that nature in your plans as well.
Absolutely. That's I had not heard that specific idea yet, but I love it, and I think it's exactly what we're looking to hear, to say, all right, well, that would cost this and this would cost the, and if we put everything on the table and try and figure out what how to meet the most needs possible with the least resources possible, that's that 1 + 1 = 3 scenario that just makes sense in sharing space and sharing programs and sharing resources.
We said the only thing on the list now is a sports venue, so I'm just trying to add a few things to your list early and often.
Yeah, well, that's our one list of asks, and it's a big ask, granted, but we're also willing to do whatever work necessary to solve community asks.
All right. Well, thank.
Chair, could I follow up on the affordable housing question?
Sure.
One of the things we know in education is a critical mass issue. We see this when it comes to, for example, African American students in AP classes. If you're the one student in the class, you wonder what's going on. I find that a lot in my own profession in the sciences, right? The isolated individual, it's tough. So my question to affordable housing, I mean, we hear numbers thrown around regularly in the news, 10% affordable housing, whatnot. You've done more urban design planning research clearly than I have. Do we have a sense of what is the affordable housing critical mass? Right? If we look at a school, for example, if we have 10% of children eligible for free and reduced lunch in a school and 90% not, that's a high wealth school. So 10% is kind of a small number. When you look at sort of the socioeconomic level and compare it to performance grades, now the performance grades are horrible. They don't tell us a whole lot. But you do sort of see a fairly flat trend until you cross about 50%, somewhere between 50 and 60% is where you see the poverty level have a major academic impact. So I guess my question is sort of in the inverse, is 10% enough to have affordable housing not feel like I'm sort of the freak on the block? Probably not the right word, but I don't know. But you understand what I'm getting at?
I do.
We've got to get to a critical mass if the community is going to be able to grow. And so what's the research on what's the appropriate critical mass for affordable housing to actually work?
I have not seen any study that specifically references that data point of search of an inflection point of where it's optimized. However, I would say that from everything I have learned, there is if it's done well, managed well, and integrated into the development in a way that no one would ever know which is the affordable apartment and which is the non-affordable apartment, and that's privileged information, is private, and there is no stigma associated with it because nobody knows.
You know what car I drive.
And what that percentage might be, I don't think we're ever going to be in danger of crossing that percentage, particularly if the communities are well managed. Our affordable housing partner, Integrated, is out of Atlanta, African-American owned business that has done large mixed-use, mixed-income developments in Atlanta very successfully. And one of the key drivers of success of keeping tenants in the buildings has been the partnership with the school system. Because what they learned was that if they had a connection to the school system, this is the property management group, if the manager of the apartments had a connection to the school system and they learned that children were there was a change in the children's behavior and their attendance and any of the metrics that I'm sure you all are well aware of, that was like the canary in the coal mine, and they could provide a direct intervention for that family and help that family through whatever struggles they're dealing with, so that they don't fail to pay and end up losing their apartment. They don't have all the snowball effect of negative impacts that happen after that. And so that kind of a partnership between a property management company and a school system allows for that affordable housing to work better with fewer issues, and it's because Integrated does such a wonderful job that we brought them on as a partner.
Mr. Gaylord, I want to thank you for coming this evening. Thank you for not only being willing to share this information, but to also receive all the questions from the board and my colleagues. Obviously, there's a lot of interest in this project and some concerns and questions. But we look forward to further conversations and the possible opportunity to partner down the road. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you all for your thoughtful deliberation. I would be happy to meet with any of you all individually or in smaller groups to get into greater detail if that'd be helpful.
All right.
Thanks.
Thank you, sir. All right, so at this time, and again, thank you also, board members, for your thoughtful comments, questions to Mr. Gaylord as well. If I can entertain a motion now to approve tonight's consent agenda as amended.
So move.
Chair Sutton, I wanted to second that with support of all the educators who drink Mountain Dew on our consent agenda. Thank you.
What, say that again?
Pepsi contracts.
So, and with apologies to all the Diet Coke fans.
All right, so I got a motion from Mrs. Cash, second from Mrs. Kushner, to approve tonight's consent agenda as amended. Is there any conversation? Hearing none, all those in favor show by the sign of aye. Opposed, nay. Ayes have it. Consent agenda is passed. All right, moving on to our action action agenda. The first is from Academic Advancement, and this is the 2021-2022 virtual program options. Dr. McFarland.
Thank you. Thank you. Good evening. So during the Board of Education work session prior to this meeting, the staff provided updates on the Wake County Public School System Virtual Academy program planning for the 21-22 school year. Topics included an overview of current operational assumptions, some key factors impacting our decision making, and again, we provided a general timeline for the future next steps. So we're asking that the Board of Education tonight approve a pre-K virtual option for the 21-22 school year only at all schools except noted schools where a virtual option is not compatible with the program intent of the school. A virtual option will not be provided for classes, programs, and courses when the staff determines that offering such the option is not viable, such as when in-person learning experience is essential, and we included some of those examples earlier tonight in the presentation. Staff, however, will continue working to update the board and the constituents and keep you informed of all operational updates and developments as we move along in this process, and we will also be bringing to the board any necessary policy changes that need to occur within the future. And so at this time, we will turn this over. If you have any further questions, our team is here to respond, and we appreciate the board's consideration of this action item tonight.
Thank you, Dr. McFarland, and I want to be clear. I think you said that you're asking approval for a pre-K virtual option, but it's actually a pre-K-12
yes.
virtual option for the 21-22 school year. So I want to make sure board members are clear on that. And there, in the précis, there is a list of schools that are not included in this request. And just to read through those very quickly, Mount Vernon Middle, River Oaks Middle, SCORE Academy, Connections Academy, Wake Young Women's Academy, Wake Young Men's Academy, North Wake College and Career Academy, Wake STEM Early College, Vernon Malone High School, Wake Early College of Health and Sciences, Mary Phillips High School, Longview High School, Crossroads Flex High School, and the Bridges program. So these schools would not be included in the request to approve a virtual pre-K-12 option.
That is correct.
Okay. Is there a motion to approve staff's request for a 2021-2022 virtual program option?
Chair Sutton, I'll make a motion to approve the virtual program option for pre-K-12 for 2021-22 with the exceptions that are listed on the crises.
Second.
Got a motion from Mrs. Mahaffey, a second from Mrs. Scott to approve staff's request for a 21-22 virtual program option for the next school year, 21-22. Is there any discussion? Mr. Hagerty.
Thank you. And Dr. McFarland, I think staff did a great job in the work session. But just for folks who might be joining us at this part of the meeting, can you just give like a brief explanation of why some schools would not be recommended for virtual academy, whether it's Wake STEM Early College, SCORE Academy, something like that, just so people understand why it's not available at all schools?
Well, it can be dependent upon the size or the special program intent of the school. It can also have to deal with, if a student is a junior or a senior on a specific program, and moving would put that sort of track in jeopardy. So, we did make clear during the presentation that if folks are concerned at those schools, we certainly want them to meet with their counselor and their principal and talk through what their options might be if they really have some health concerns, underlying health concerns about attendance next year.
Thank you. And for some of the schools where we have an outside partner, like an academic partner, it's difficult to make assurances with.
Right, because in working with the outside partners, they will not be providing a virtual option, and so it makes it difficult to align those programs.
Great, thank you.
Mrs. Carter.
I think it's also important to note the two groups that are excluded from the VA option too, not just all the schools, just for those who didn't, the extended content regional programs and occupational course of study programs, because the schools have kind of been talked about at least one previous meeting, maybe more, but those two groups, this is the first time, I was made aware, when it posted Friday evening. So I think for public information-wise, I think it's important to reiterate that again. So that was kind of my
So would you like for just a brief overview? Okay. All right. Ms. Hamilton, are you?
And while you're reviewing, I was just going to say, can you review, we had talked about a semester break and the opportunity for that regarding, I'm just throwing it in there while you're doing a recap.
Okay, so I'll do, while we wait for Mrs. Hamilton, I'll talk about the year-long registration. So we are asking that folks commit to a year because of, we don't want to have concurrent teaching. We want to provide consistency to our folks that are attending face-to-face and our folks that are in the virtual academy. However, we do understand if past year has taught us anything, we know that things can change. And so we understand that as the vaccine becomes more available, readily available, particularly for students of, our high school age, and the pandemic, may worsen, we want to be able to look at that option again. And I think to the point of the work session that we talked about earlier, we will work to bring this back to the board very early. At the semester break is not the time we would start talking about it or bring it for any information. We certainly would begin looking and planning for October and November. And I also have to say the team has really done an excellent job having sort of an A, B, and a C plan. Okay, and with regard to special education, because of the nature of the program and some of the requirements of some of the expectations around IEPs, like the hand-over-hand feeding, some of the practices, it's just not conducive to a virtual environment. And
Dr.
so,
McFarland, could I extend that? May I extend that?
oh, I didn't see you up there. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. Ms. Carter, thank you for the question, and thank you for calling that out so that we can be explicit for our families. So I want to start with occupational course of study. The occupational course of study, the coursework, the core coursework required for occupational course of study requires on-campus work hours, community-based work hours, and paid work hours. And those are required courses. Those are not electives. And while the state board has given us flexibility for this year and the previous year, we do not anticipate that we would have that flexibility next year. And students who would be in a virtual learning environment could not complete those requirements and therefore would miss those graduation opportunities depending on whether they were freshmen, sophomores, juniors, or seniors. They would miss those work hours. So for those reasons, we will not be offering a virtual option. And that's similar to some of the high school courses that you see listed there as well. With regard to extended content students, and I know you guys have shed some heartfelt tears along with some parents, as has special education services and other folks in the districts. There are a lot of reasons why virtual learning is not the most conducive environment for the kinds of learning that we would be talking about. Most students who are in extended content classes or regional programs require close proximity of their teachers, their related service providers, or any teaching instructional assistants that might be in the classroom. And while we were able to navigate that and the emergency school closure, that certainly is not the best learning for students who are in most extended content classes. And we want to provide students with continuity of their goals and their milestones on their IEPs so that they can make progress towards those accomplishments and also keep pace with their academic course of study. And again, I thank you for calling that out.
Dr. Martin.
Yes, thank you. Before we vote, I would like to just reemphasize the point that I made in work session, that this is a one-year authorization for virtual academy. This is not standing up a virtual school. This is not a long-term plan. That would need to be a completely different discussion. And the purpose, well, not a litmus test that you must pass to become part of, the purpose of this is in response to the pandemic. And that doesn't mean that we're creating a right to a virtual academy. There will not be the same number of electives offered. There will be a sound basic education, but we do a lot more than a sound basic education in the Wake County Public School System. So the intent of this is in response to the pandemic, particularly because vaccines are not yet available to our school-age children. And so we fully understand that there are many families who just, would love to have their kids in person, but not until the kids get a vaccine. So I just want to reemphasize that that is the purpose of this, and also in light of that, that we be particularly sensitive to our staff, because there are many things about this program that could be perceived by our staff as that they don't really have an option for the virtual academy if they're worried about the vaccine for their own children. And I think we need to be very perceptive to the needs of our staff, because if we don't have good staff, we don't have a good school system. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Martin. Mrs. Kushner.
Thank you, Dr. Martin. Thank you, Chair Sutton. And I want to add to Dr. Martin's point, we also will have staff who perhaps have suppressed immune systems who, even with the vaccine, may not get the same protections that most people get, so we have to be cognizant of that. So thank you for underscoring that. And to Ms. Hamilton, I think when we look back that initially we wanted to bring back the special education students as well as our pre-K students, I would also want to lift up that we acknowledge that early education is also in pre-K is not ideal in a virtual environment. So while we should acknowledge the concerns and fears many parents and families have regarding in-person, and particularly those who've been disproportionately affected by COVID, we should still try to work really hard to allay those concerns to try to get our pre-K kiddos in person would be my, I just feel like I need to say that before we vote. Thank you.
And if I could just sort of close by saying that appreciate all of the questions and the feedback that we had in the earlier session. And as we move into asking the board to approve this virtual option for our families, just want to reiterate one last time that we are ready, expectant, and want our families to access in-person learning for the next school year. We are in Plan A now. Things seem to be going very well. We hope that things will continue to improve in the community, the access to vaccine will increase, and all of those things will contribute to ensuring that our families, our staff, our community understand that our schools are safe and that we are ready for you to return to in-person instruction. Thank you.
Thank you, Superintendent Moore.
Unless another board member wanted to speak, I just had one more. I had one comment I wanted to add.
Go ahead.
Okay. I just want, for clarity between board and superintendent sort of lines here, I just wanted to make it clear that the board's not approving the plan that was articulated in work session. Obviously, board members, as always, gave very good feedback to the plan, and that the administration takes that under advisement. But I wanted to be clear that the administration is free to, as it sees fit, to alter the plan as needed in a timely way, and of course, let the board know about that. And so that's sort of operational, and I just wanted it to be clear on that point so that there's no, well, I thought that the staff said they were going to do that or this. But the board is being asked to approve what's specifically stated on the précis and what Vice Chair Mahaffey stated, and that's the pre-K through 12 virtual options with the schools and some programs that have been excluded, and as it's specifically stated on the précis. So I just didn't want it to be a situation that there was any confusion about whether staff had to come back if they were going to change the, a line about staff responsibility or student responsibility, that's within the administration. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Council. All right, got a motion and a second on this item to approve the virtual program option for 21-22 school year, program only. Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor show by the sign of aye. Any opposed, nay? Ayes have it. The request for the virtual program option for the 2021-22 school year is approved. Next item on the agenda.
Can I get a quick clarification for something that our trustee lawyer told us? Now, what can be changed without us knowing it, just so that I know when the public talks to me that I can say I didn't need to approve that? Is there something in specifics? I'm always a little worried about this stuff.
Yeah. So I don't think he said anything can be changed without us knowing. I think it's just the opposite. I think, and I'll let her speak, but any changes, I think what he was referring to was those things that are operational, and that we are approving the request for the virtual program option, but that there is room for operational plans and changes to be made that don't necessarily require board approval. But I think Superintendent Moore has, as she always has done, bring those things to our attention to make sure that we are aware, but that they don't require board approval because they're operational in nature.
I do think it will be important to continue to maintain a solid communication moving forward. For example, if we update documents or change parameters and requirements on something, because we know that public parents, people will ask you questions sometimes because they don't know who to go to. So we've got to continue to maintain that so that you're not caught by surprise when something does have to change for whatever reason and you understand the basis for it. And I think that is something that you should expect of us as we move forward, and certainly let us know if we're not hitting the mark.
Thank you for that question, clarification, Mrs. Cash. Next item is Board Policy 2120, Code of Ethics and Responsibilities for School Board Members, coming to us on its first reading. Dr. Crane.
Board, I'm here to present to you the first reading of Policy 2120, Code of Ethics and Responsibilities for School Board Members. Board Policy 2120, Code of Ethics and Responsibilities for School Board Members, is presented as a revised policy. Revisions reflect updates made by the North Carolina School Boards Association. When given final board approval, it will replace current Policy 2120, Code of Ethics and Responsibilities for School Board Members. It was reviewed at the March 23, 2021 Policy Committee meeting. You will see in Section B, Specific Board Commitments, numbered item 14, that there is a highlighted section. That section reflects the request of the Policy Committee to align the language in this policy with the language in Policy 7100, Recruitment and Selection of Personnel, to define immediate family. The language in both policies is now aligned, reading, immediate family means spouse, parent, child, brother, sister, grandparent, or grandchild. The term includes the step, half, and in-law relationships. We request the board's approval of the first reading of Policy 2120, Code of Ethics and Responsibilities for School Board Members.
Mrs. Kushner.
Thank you, sir. Chair Sutton, I'd like to move approval of revised policy, Board Policy 2120, Code of Ethics and Responsibilities for School Board Members on first reading.
Second.
And thank you, Dr. Crane, for making that adjustment. And we had a busy March policy committee, which you'll see in the next 4 items as well. Thanks.
So I have a motion from Mrs. Kushner, second from Mrs. Mahaffey, to approve Board Policy 2120, Code of Ethics and Responsibilities for School Board Members on its first reading. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor show by the sign of aye. Opposed, nay. Ayes have it. Board Policy 2120 is approved on its first reading. Thank you, Dr. Crane. Next up is Board Policy 4270 and 6145 on concussion and head injury. I think that was being presented by Mr. Coe.
Chair Sutton, Superintendent Moore, and members of the board, I'm here to present to you the first reading of Policy 4270, 6145, concussion and head injury. Board Policy 4270, 6145, concussion and head injury is a revised policy. Revisions reflect updates made by the North Carolina School Boards Association. When given final board approval, it will replace current Policy 4270, 6145, concussion and head injury. It was reviewed at the March 23, 2021 Policy Committee meeting. We request the board's approval of the first reading of Policy 4270, 6145, concussion and head injury.
Mrs. Kushner.
And Chair Sutton, I'd like to move approval of Board Policy 4270, 6145, concussion and head injury on first reading.
Second.
Got a motion by Mrs. Kushner, second by Mrs. Carter, to approve Board Policy 4270, 6145, concussion and head injury on its first reading. During the discussion. Seeing none, all those in favor show by a sign of aye. Opposed, nay. Ayes have it. Board Policy 4270/6145 on concussions and head injury is approved on its first reading. Thank you, Mr. Coe.
Thank you.
Next up is Board Policy 6100, Student Health Services. Now it's being brought to us by Kelly Creech and Paul Coe, KOH.
Thank you, Chair Sutton. Superintendent Moore and members of the board, I'm here to present to you the first reading of Policy 6100, Student Health Services. So for Board Policy 6100, this is a new policy. It's a policy, it's a combination of 2 policies created by the North Carolina School Boards Association as part of their Policies to Lead the Schools manual. which includes 6100 Goals of Student Health Services and 6110 Organization of Student Health Services. It's part of the policy migration project. Given that there's no current policy such as this, when given final board approval, it will create new policy. It was reviewed at the March 23rd, 2021 Policy Committee meeting. We request the board's approval of the first reading of Policy 6100, Student Health Services.
Chair Sutton, I'd like to make a motion to approve Board Policy 6100, new policy, Student Health Services, on first reading.
Second.
Got a motion by Mrs. Kushner, second by Mrs. Carter to approve Board Policy 6100 on student health services on its first reading. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor show by a sign of aye. Any opposed, nay. Ayes have it, Board Policy 6100 on student health services is approved on its first reading. Thank you, Mr. Coe. Next up is Board Policy 6220, Operation of Child Nutrition Services on its first reading. And this one is being brought to us by Paula DeLuca. Good evening, Mr. Luca.
Good evening, Chair Sutton, Superintendent Moore, and members of the board. I'm here to present to you the first reading of Policy 6220, Operation of Child Nutrition Services. Board Policy 6220, Operation of Child Nutrition Services, is a new policy. The policy was created by the North Carolina School Boards Association as part of their Policies to Lead the Schools manual. It is part of the policy migration project. When given final board approval, it will replace current Policy 7040, Child Nutrition Program, and current Policy 6221, Meal Charges. It was reviewed at the March 23, 2021 Policy Committee meeting. You will see in Section B, Meal Charges, that there is a highlighted section. That section reflects revisions recommended by the Policy Committee. In that section, we provided language that is applicable across all grade spans, school levels, meal prices regarding meal charges. So the language now states, in the event that a student is unable to pay for a meal on a particular day, the student may charge a reimbursable meal, so long as it does not create a negative account balance that exceeds the value of 3 days of meals, breakfast and lunch, based on current student meal prices. We request the board's approval on first reading of Policy 6220, Operation of Child Nutrition Services.
Chair Sutton, I'd like to make a motion to approve Board Policy 6220, Operation of Child Nutrition Services, on first reading with the alterations stated by Ms. DeLuca. Thank you for bringing that and those changes to us.
I second that.
Got a motion by Mrs. Kushner, second by Mrs. Cash to approve Board Policy 6220, Operation of Child Nutrition Services on its first reading. Is there any discussion?
I did want to thank colleagues for the good discussion we had to do the amendment to have 3 days of meals, because I think it's important, and was very thoughtful in thinking through of thinking about a child's life during a week where it might be pretty tough. So thank you very much for bringing that to us and for my colleagues' work on that in the committee.
Thank you, Ms. Kushner. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor show by a sign of aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. Ayes have it, Board Policy 6220, Operation of Child Nutrition Services, is approved on its first reading. That takes us to Board Policy 6225, and I think, Mr. Luca, you're staying with us on this one.
I
This is
am.
on free and reduced price meal services.
Thank you, Chair Sutton, Superintendent Moore, and members of the board. Again, I'm here to present to you the first reading of Policy 6225, Free and Reduced Price Meal Services. Board Policy 6225, Free and Reduced Price Meal Services, is a new policy. The policy was created by the North Carolina School Boards Association as part of their Policies to Lead the Schools manual. It is part of the policy migration project. When given final board approval, it will replace current Policy 6710, free and reduced price meals, and current policy 7020, free and reduced price benefits. It was reviewed at the March 23, 2021 Policy Committee meeting. We request the board's approval on first reading of policy 6225, free and reduced price meal services.
Ms. Kushner.
And with final policy, I move approval of Board Policy 6225, free and reduced price meal services on first reading.
Second.
Got a motion by Mrs. Kushner, second by Mrs. Scott. Was that you? Second by Mrs. Scott to approve Board Policy 6225, free and reduced price meal services on its first reading. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor show by the sign of aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Ayes have it. Board Policy 6225 is approved on its first reading.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. DeLuca. Want to go back now and bring forward the item on remote learning day adjustment for the 2020-2021 traditional calendar. This is being brought to us by Wade Martin. Mr. Martin.
Good evening, Chair Sutton, Superintendent Moore, and board members. Staff is requesting approval to move the remote learning day that was previously scheduled for May 5th, 2021 to May 13th, 2021 on the traditional calendar. The teacher workday that was previously scheduled on May 13th was moved to April 7th in order to support the return to Plan A. The calendar committee recommends that the remote learning day be adjusted to allow schools to continue with activities already planned for the May 13th workday. I would add that following the decision to move the May 13th workday to support school staff for their preparations to return to Plan A, the district received significant feedback from parents regarding the impact of removing the teacher workday from May 13th and suggested that we add an asynchronous day to that day instead. We did not think that would work. I would share with the board that the calendar committee reconvened virtually together with members of our multi-tier instructional team that designed and implemented the schedule for the remote learning days to evaluate this feedback. It was recommended from the committee that was supported by our multi-tier instructional team members not to create an additional remote learning day, but to move the already approved May 15th remote learning day, or I'm sorry, May 5th remote learning day to May 13th. We respectfully request the board's approval.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Got a motion from Dr. Martin, second from Vice Chair Mahaffey to approve staff's request to adjust remote learning day for the 2020-2021 traditional calendar. Is there any discussion?
Go ahead.
Mrs. Carter.
Yeah, I just wanted to say I am concerned a little about, we did get feedback about making the request to make a change on that date. However, I'm also concerned because we're, again, making yet another change, and I just want to voice that concern. It just seems like we just approved it. Now we're coming back. Another change is, for lack of a better term, like a yo-yo. Like, I just feel like that, and I want to acknowledge to families and staff that I understand that, and I've heard that feedback and concern as well. But we did, on the board side, receive quite a bit of feedback, so I'm acknowledging both sides, but the understanding for how it looks as well. Thank you.
Mr. Hager, did you want to add something?
Just to echo what Ms. Carter said, but then also to really acknowledge that this is something that sometimes we bring a proposal, we hear about something, and we're told we can't do it, and there might be very good justifications why it can't be done. But it takes a lot to go back and to keep reviewing and keep looking to try to find a way to make it happen. So I really appreciate the calendar committee going and taking that extra step. And even though it looked like it was something that you couldn't do, really examining and really pushing and then finding this other recommendation. Again, there will be some uncertainty for some families where things change again, but I appreciate your diligence in working on this issue.
Well, thank you for that feedback. And again, when the district made the decision to move that the May 13th workday, that was really the only workday that was available to the board and to staff to be able to support that transition to Plan A. That window of time that we assessed that decision, we did not have the time that we took now to invest in engaging with our stakeholders to get that feedback. And so I appreciate those comments and that we are being responsive to our families in the district. So thank you for that.
All right, is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion to approve the remote learning day adjustment, show by sign of aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. Ayes have it. Staff's request is approved.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Before I entertain a motion to go into closed session, I mentioned earlier about our two ROTC staff members at Sanderson High School. I didn't have the names, but Ms. Kushner was kind enough to jump online and find those two individuals. So I just wanted to lift the names of Colonel Patrick Davis and Master Sergeant Tanika Howard. Those are the two ROTC instructors at Sanderson High School who I referenced earlier in our meeting. So thank you to the two of you for helping and educating young Jathan and others there in the Sanderson ROTC program. Your work and commitment is greatly appreciated. Thank you so much. With that, I will entertain a motion to go into closed session.
Chair Sutton, I'd like to make a motion to go into closed session to consider confidential personnel information protected under GS 143-318.11A1, A3, and A6, to consult with the Board of Education attorney and preserve the attorney-client privilege as provided in GS 143-318.11A3, to consult with the Board of Education attorney and preserve attorney-client privilege as provided in GS 143-318.22A3 due to current litigation MB by and through his parents SB and BB versus Wake County Board of Education OAH number 21-EDC-00988 and Miller et al. v. Wake County Board of Education et al. Wake County file number 20 CVS 003352. To consult with an attorney employed or retained by the board in order to preserve the attorney-client privilege between the attorney and the board, and to consult with and instruct board staff or negotiating agents concerning the position to be taken by or on behalf of the board on the particulars of the acquisition of the real property for public infrastructure improvements related to West Millbrook Middle School site, and to receive board's instructions as to the position to be taken on behalf of the board in negotiations in relation thereto. To consider the confidential student information provided under GS 115C-402 and the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act 20 U.S.C. 1232G.
Got a motion by Ms. Mahaffey, second from Mr. Hagerty to move into closed session for the items just stated and that are listed on our agenda. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor show by sign of aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Ayes have it. We are now in closed session, and that adjourns our public portion of tonight's meeting. Thank you for your patience, and thank you for joining us this evening.
She said she got a cheeky